welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 158 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 14 of A Storm of Swords, that's Catelyn 2.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information that will help you, in particular, if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing all right. The better, more important question is, how are you?
Well, I'm great. I'm very happy to be back. I had a long vacation and it was lovely. And I'm hot foot from the airplane to record, operating off only 2 hours of sleep. So
what could
we'll
go
see
wrong?
How it goes. Yeah, but yeah, I had an amazing time. I was in Greece and France. Greece just for vacation, and France to see my brother get married. And we had every minute of the trip was terrific fun. We had a great time everywhere we went.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's what you look for and hope for in a vacation.
And we almost had no travel snafus, but we did have one pretty major one. But it's all too much to get into at this point. But I'm not going to do it in this podcast because I'm going to drib and drab the stories from this vacation over the next few podcasts. I think,
Okay.
But there is absolute gold at Rob's bachelor party.
How could there not be?
My favourite part about it is how far he drove to avoid exactly what happened.
Well, that sounds like a story to look forward to, I'll say.
And the thing is, his bachelor party consisted of him, me, my son, and my brother and I's brother-in-law, Mark, who's married to my sister. And that was it. It was just the four of us. It wasn't like a big,
Right. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot of trouble would...
Yeah, exactly. But hijinks ensued.
Perfect. I can't wait to hear about such hijinks.
So how have you been? I mean, I haven't talked to you for 3 weeks.
Well, we talked a little bit.
We had a work call, didn't we?
Well, we did. We did have a work call, but you also called me on my birthday, if you recall.
That's the call I'm thinking of, yeah.
We did discuss work as well, but you also wished me happy birthday, which was much appreciated.
Yes. Well, yes, again, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I was swanning around Europe on your birthday when I should have been here, paying homage.
It's all right. I'll forgive you this time. Things went okay. Not particularly smooth without you in the States. It must be your lack of presence that you see in the notes that I wrote the word bumper cars.
Bumper cars, yes, it's interesting.
It's because apparently last week my cars were confused with bumper cars. I'm not sure what was going on, but both my car and Molly's car were hit in parking lots. And neither time were either of us in the car when it happened.
Get out.
Only the van was spared. Only my trusty old steed.
Wow.
Yep, mine happened in a Costco parking lot. And it looks like, based on the evidence on my car, that a car either tried to pull in and hit my back rear passenger side wheel well, or was backing out and swiped it. Not nearly the kind of damage that was done to Molly's. It was a boy trying to back out of his spot and didn't cut the wheel sharp enough and slammed right into the back of her. So within 3 days of each other, I believe it was.
Yeah, that's really strange.
I know.
I'm actually glad we were out of the country for that, because you've heard the story about Carson giving me a ride to work once and hitting 3 cars.
I would have blamed. Where's the third car?
Exactly. One story from the vacation. We rented a car at one point, and so we were in Europe. So they drive on the right in we were in France specifically. We were driving on the right, so I'm very familiar. In fact, I've never owned a car in the UK. I learned to drive there, but I've never owned a car. So 99% of my driving has been on cars that go on the right-hand side of the road. But living in the United States, one thing that almost every car is
large.
Yeah, but automatic was the word I was
looking for. Yes, definitely.
But rental cars in Europe, not so much.
Okay.
Amazing. Really. I didn't do a terrible job. I mean, I was occasionally sort of kangarooing down the road. And I
like that term.
I kept trying to change gear with my left hand. I kept like messing with the windows and opening the door. But it's been 23 years since I last did that, but somehow the muscle memory was still there. When you press the clutch down, go with your left hand.
So, right. Yeah. Well, you also see I have Kim written down here.
Yes.
So, we work with a woman named Kim.
A friend called Kim, yes, okay.
And she IM'd me the other day and said, "Is Simon coming back soon or what?" And I was like, "Why? What do you mean?" She's still listening. Remember I had mentioned a while ago that she started just listening to our opening dialogue and then stops as soon as we get down to business? And I was like, "Oh, wow, you're still listening." So she knew you weren't here because she was missing last week's episode.
That's strange, actually, because my brother-in-law, Mark, who was one of the people in attendance at the bachelor party, while I was in France with him, he listened to all of the intros. He listened to the first 10 minutes of every episode of the podcast. He was like, "Oh, that's great." He pointed out the episodes where he got a mention. Yeah.
Well, hi, Mark. And Kim. Yeah. Who knew? The most popular part of the whole show was this.
a little non-Game of Thrones part of the podcast is what's bringing in the punters. All right. Well, we have blathered far too long already. Let's get down to business.
Bye, Kim. Bye, Mark.
Bye. How did we leave Catelyn Stark? So last we saw of Cat, she was suggesting her own punishment for freeing Jamie, being confined to her father's chambers. Quite a bit lighter than some people had in mind.
Right, sure, yeah.
She was pondering why her father continued to call for Tansy and ask for forgiveness. And if you recall, Mackelly had very good information about that.
I did.
It's very strong. Right. And she met with her brother Edmure upon his return to Riverrun from the Battle of the Fords. He was angry at her for freeing Jamie and alerted Roose Bolton in order that he would capture and return the Kingslayer. Mackelly, why don't we give them the summary of this one?
Okay. The barking of the hounds of Riverrun signify the return of the king. Only the presence of the direwolf Greywind could produce the cacophony of sound coming from the kennel. Unlike Edmure, who hasn't returned to see her since his initial visit, Kat's confident Robb will see her. Her father Hoster weakens daily and deliriously mutters Tansy and begs for forgiveness. The only bit of news she's heard is that Robin Ryger and his men have returned to the castle soaked and shipless. Knowing the Kingslayer outmaneuvered them brings her some joy. The mission continues.
She suspects something has gone wrong. The day Edmure returned, she heard arguing and raised voices in the yard. She watched as nearly 40 men rode out of the castle, trampling on the Stark direwolf banner as they went. She thought she recognised Sir Perwyn Frey in the group, but couldn't be sure. While she's pondering this, Desmond Grell arrives and announces that the king commands that she attend him in the Great Hall. It's the moment of truth. Will she have lost another son for her actions of freeing the Kingslayer, or will he understand and forgive?
Cat enters the crowded Great Hall as Edmure is being praised for his success in the Battle of the Fords. The hall quiets to a hush as the people begin to notice her presence. The sight of her uncle, Brendan Blackfish Tully, gives her comfort. Several strangers accompany her uncle and Robb on the dais.
Cat turns her attention to her son. She sees an emotion she can't quite place on his face. It's not anger. Could it be apprehension? But why would the king be apprehensive? Well, actually, I have a little theory about that when we get to it. When we talk about this. Yeah. There's a perfectly reasonable reason why he might be apprehensive, because he might be about to execute his mother.
Oh, true. She hasn't thought about that.
Yes, she might want to start thinking about that. That isn't the reason. Yes, you'll find out shortly. Cat cuts to the chase, acknowledging that Robb surely knows what she did, but was he told her reasons? Robb knows it was done for the girls. With that, Lord Rickard Karstark bursts through the crowd, lamenting that her actions prevent him from his revenge for his two sons' death. The Great John tells Rickard to back off. It was a mother's folly, but Rickard instead calls it treason.
King Robb's heard enough. Nobody calls his mother a traitor in his presence. Lord Rickard storms out, and Robb asks Cat to forgive the man. Cat agrees if Robb will forgive her. He already has. He knows what it's like to love someone so greatly. Robb calls an end to the gathering. It's then that Cat realizes Greywind is missing from the hall.
2 interjection comments before I continue, if I can. One is, I like the fact that you gave Rickard Karstark his porn name there. In the notes it says Lord Rockard.
Does it? I didn't even notice. It does.
And the other one is, it is kind of weird that Robb says that about knowing what it's like to love someone so deeply you make mistakes, because it's like, surely that would set the alarm bells ringing. Like, what
I thought
is
the
he
same
talking
thing.
about? You know?
I thought the same thing. Is it for Greywind? What is?
So, Robb finally introduces the strangers on the dais as Sir Rolph Spicer and his sister, the Lady Sybell Westerling, wife of Lord Darwin, along with her children, Sir Reynald, Elenya, Rollum, who's squiring to King Robb, and her eldest daughter, Jeyne. He stammers out that Jeyne also has the distinction of being Robb's new bride and queen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Cat is understandably stunned. Thoughts run through her head. He's too young. He's pledged to another. And finally, what have you done? Cat now comprehends Robb's look of apprehension earlier, and his easy forgiveness of her crime as love not always being wise and leading us to great folly following our hearts. She at least admires his cunning as equal to a master mummer or a king.
Cat composes herself to welcome her new family. They are then shown to their chambers while Cat and Robb discuss. Robb explains that their marriage puts the Westerlings in grave danger as Jeyne's father is a Lannister bannerman. He was taken captive in the Battle of the Whispering Wood, and so had no say in the matter. They bring a mere 50 swords, a dozen knights, to Robb's cause. Cat points out that meanwhile he's lost the Freys and their 3,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 knights.
Robb explains he took an arrow to the shoulder before the crag surrendered. It festered, so Jeyne nursed him back to health. She was with him when the news of Bran and Rickon's death reached him, and she comforted him. Of course, Cat has an idea of what that comfort entailed. She
didn't need the air quotes that you kindly provided.
Right. He married her the next day. Robb hopes they can repair the damage with the Freys by finding a new match or 2 or 3 for Lord Walder's daughters, proposing Wendell Manderly and the Great John's 2 uncles. Cat does not think that lot will cut it.
Yes, I mean, they don't sound like much of a replacement for the king in the north.
Right.
Cat asks where Greywind is. He's in the yard. The wolf scares Robb's new wife and her family. He particularly doesn't care for Jeyne's uncle Rolph. This news unsettles Catelyn, and she begs Robb to send that man away, pointing out the wolves are more than wolves, perhaps sent by the old gods. Robb agrees to send Sir Rolph away to appease her, but insists he's a king and a man grown. He doesn't need protection from Greywind.
Edmure rejoins the group, and the Blackfish tells Edmure he should thank Robb for his farce with the praise for Edmure's efforts to stop the Lannisters' forces from crossing the Red Fork. It was done only to spare Edmure's shame in front of his people. Edmure's confused. Good men died in the Battle of the Fords. Robb tells him he was commanded to hold Riverrun. No more. Edmure says he did, and he bloodied Tywin's nose simultaneously. Robb explains he wanted to draw Tywin west, to keep him busy and away from King's Landing.
The Blackfish adds that they plan to take a defensive position along the Gold Road in an advantageous spot where they'd either crush Tywin's force or contain him in the west. That would allow Stannis to take out Joffrey, Cersei and Tyrion. They could then make peace with Stannis. Instead, Edmure delayed Tywin long enough that he could receive messages from King's Landing and race to the city's aid. Cat says none of that matters now. All of Robb's focus must be on retaking Winterfell. Robb is hopeful Sir Roderick might have done it. Edmure wonders how they'll get past Moat Cailin. It's held by the Ironborn. Robb believes their only shot is to win the Freys back to their cause. There must be something that would soothe Lord Walder's pride. Cat responds, not something, someone.
Someone. The plot thickens.
Yes. That didn't end with a question mark, but for us it does. Who
right.
would she be? Mackelly, did we spoil this a little bit? Because I seem to remember saying when Edmure went out and fought the battles of the fords that he was doing everyone a disservice.
I think you, what I recall you saying specifically, I don't remember if you said that or not, was that Tywin may have been fainting going that way anyway.
Yeah. Okay, good. That still holds up then. Not complete spoiler. Right. But actually, to me, I've been an apologist for Edmure all along. This is the kind of thing you've got to tell him.
I 100% agree. It's in the notes later on, but yes, 100%.
Don't have this big convoluted plan that really, very much involves. It's like we just got back to discover that the dogs probably went like 14 hours without getting fed because one of the people who was supposed to be dog sitting didn't follow the instructions that I left so painstakingly. I didn't leave it to their imagination.
Right.
I didn't say, stay in Riverrun, don't leave. I mean, they didn't say stay in Riverrun, don't leave. They said stay in Riverrun, hold Riverrun.
Right, hold Riverrun. Yes.
Right. If you can hold Riverrun and go fight the Battle of the Fords at the same time, win-win, right? Unless you tell me not to.
Right. It reminds me of of a situation that happened last weekend. Stacey was making a buffalo chicken dip before the Steelers game, and she started it and she had it.
By
in
the
the
way,
pot.
just interject, please. Could you be more American? I mean, just could you be more American? You were wearing a
we could
Uncle
have had
Sam
apple pie.
Outfit.
We could have been eating apple pie afterward.
By the way, apple pie predates this country by a long way. You claimed it as your own, but
right, yes.
We had it in the UK, let me tell you.
We could have been listening to Elvis Presley. How about that? Is that? We tried watching that movie last night. We could not get through it.
What movie is it?
Elvis. It's a fairly new movie out called Elvis. It's on HBO Max. It's just weird. Anyway, it reminds me of a story. I mean, it reminds me of that situation. She started the dip, and she said she had to go do something. She's taking this class. She had to go do something for this class she was taking. She goes, stir this. So I'm stirring, and she's not coming back. And I'm just stirring. And she comes back and goes, why are you still stirring that? You should have taken it off the burner. And I was like, you didn't. You told me to keep stirring.
You are the opposite of Edmure because you did exactly what you were told to the letter.
Right. Exactly.
You did not try any creative thinking at all.
Well, yes. But if you want me to do something specific, like stir it for 10 minutes and then take it off the burner, honestly, you got to tell me.
It's the secret of good leadership. Recognize the people who are going to follow your instructions to the letter. Recognize the ones who are going to go beyond, colour outside the lines. Yep. And if you need them to not, give them specific instructions to not do it.
Yeah.
It's all Robb's fault.
Anyway, we'll get to the specifics of that plan later. But just a quick update on current Lord Hoster Tully. As of this, we mentioned in the summary, he's getting weaker daily. Maester Vyman doesn't expect him to last too much longer. He thinks Edmure will soon be the Lord of Riverrun. And, Cap mentions that he only wakes to mutter Tansy and ask for forgiveness. And as Simon mentioned last Cat chapter, I went into what Tansy meant. Basically, Tansy is a flower. It's the primary ingredient in moon tea, which causes pregnant women to lose the baby. So we conjectured that Liza was pregnant. and Hoster had given her tansy tea or moon tea. And so Kat then conjectured that possibly Lysa was pregnant when she married Jon Arryn with someone else's child. So that's just a little background on that.
Yeah. Kat mentions that she saw Robin Ryger arrive back with his men. They were all soaked because they are the ones who were chasing Brienne and Jamie down the river, and Jamie Indiana Jones a boulder onto them and sank them.
Brienne did.
Did I say Brienne?
You said Jamie. I think you said Jamie. Maybe you said Brienne.
In my mind, I pictured a woman, but then Jamie is a sort of slightly ambiguous name, so maybe I did say Jamie. But I certainly meant Brienne. I didn't know who did it. It'd be a heck of a trick to climb the hill in shackles and push the boulder down.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is Maester Vyman says that Jamie outsmarted or outmaneuvered or whatever Robin Ryger's force, and I was like, well, how little faith do you have in Brienne that you think the guy in chains figured out how to outsmart?
Well, I guess some of that might be sort of like really throwing it back in Kat's face. It's not Brienne who's running that party. It's Jamie. He's pulling the strings, and Kat and Brienne are puppets, you know.
Yeah, now that you've let him go, he's back to running the show.
Yeah.
You know, so Kat notices when she gets to the Great Hall, one of the very first things she can't quite put her finger on, but she feels like someone is missing. And when I first read this, the first time through reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I was thinking it was probably going to be Rickard Karstark having broken away or was being held for losing control when he found out that Kat had set Jamie free.
So help me with Rickard's... where's he been? Was he with Robb?
Yeah.
He was with Robb. And so he's come back to news that Jamie's been released.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. He's going to be hopping, man.
So I thought, when I read that, I thought, uh-oh, Rickard Karstark got himself into some trouble or he stormed out. But it turns out, of course, it was the absence of Grey Wind that she was noticing.
Yeah. Robb mentions his injury later on. Kat had already heard about his injury from Maester Vyman in the previous chapter. Maester Vyman didn't seem that worried. Not his son.
Right. That's what Kat said. Any injury is worrisome to me. But then Robb executes a very careful dance in his verbal response to Kat's actions. Kat cut straight to the chase. You know, they give each other their pleasantries, and she's glad that he's home or at Riverrun. And then she says, "Clearly, you've heard what I've done. Do you know why?" And he says, "I know you did it for the girls." And he vocally disagrees with her action of releasing the Kingslayer, clearly to appease those angry at the release of Jamie. And he says, if I could wish the Kingslayer back in chains, I would. But it also sets up her forgiveness of him by setting this precedent, you know, that love is not always wise. It can lead to great folly, and we follow our hearts wherever it takes us, is the line he gives her. But it also it gives everyone in attendance reasonable excuse for why she did it. You know, that she did it out of love, and love makes you do dumb things sometimes, which is true.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it was quite deftly done by him, but also it doesn't paint a great picture of you. Even though you're acting in a deft and subtle manner, you are also being a bit of a squirrely weasel, because you just you're in trouble.
Yep. But we don't know Robb very well. He and Rickon are the only Starks and semi-Stark between Jon without a POV. But he seems fairly intelligent and wily. The way he crafts the forgiveness and the lessons behind it, to leave his mom really no choice but to forgive him. He also thinks ahead to spare Edmure the embarrassment in front of the gathered crowd, rather than just lashing out at him. which
Yeah.
prevents
He
any
actually
hard feelings.
He vocally praises him at this point, right?
That's what Cat walks into, him vocally praising him, which also prevents any hard feelings from those who might have lost loved ones in that which we later learn is a needless battle. So he's certainly showing some signs of being a king and a leader, minus telling key people to do key instructions.
And also minus not marrying the first girl who puts a Band-Aid on you.
That too.
Important kingly action. Do not do that. But of course Rickard Karstark was never going to accept forgiveness of Cat. Cat had 5 children, now she's down to 3. Again, believing Bran and Rickon to be gone.
Right.
But Rickard had 3 sons and now he has 1, and he knows for a fact those 2 are dead. No question about it. He witnessed it.
Right.
And she's taken away his vengeance, so he's going to be sore forever. And then this puts a real problem for Robb now, because the whole Northern Alliance is becoming a little bit strained and stretched, because there's the problems with Winterfell. There's who to fight now. I mean, sort of like
right.
The enemies have all retreated away from you. It's harvest time. We've said this before. People need to go back and harvest again. And now you've got the added strain of he really, to keep this alliance, particularly with the Karstarks, as strong as possible, to dress down Catelyn as much as possible. Clap her in irons for a few weeks, at least. But he couldn't do that because he was in the doghouse over his own actions.
He's about to be, right? Yeah. I think we've mentioned this before. The difference between Cat thinking she lost Bran and Rickon and Rickard having knowingly lost 2 of his 3 sons is that he willingly took his sons into battle.
Yes, true.
Cat's girls went with their father to King's Landing for him to serve his lifelong best friend as the hand of the king. I feel like there's a very noticeable difference there. The girls were expected to be safe and cared for. Yeah. These boys' lives were being put on the line the second he put them in harm's way.
Right, and also that also applies to Bran and Rickon too, because they were never put in harm's way. At least she didn't think they were.
Right.
So the rest of the bannermen in attendance have sort of a mixed level of support. Mage Mormont says she would have done the same, although honestly, I think she's just saying that. I feel like she wouldn't. The Great John gives her a bear hug and says, "Robb's beaten Jamie once, he can do it again." The others are less understanding. Jonas Bracken, for instance, is very icy.
I thought about that. Why was he specifically icy? And so I went back and looked at what's happened to Jonas since the fighting has broken out. And so early on, the Mountain raped one of his daughters, left his seat, Stonehenge, in ruin, and then he was injured and his nephew died in taking back the ruined Stonehenge from the Lannisters. So he's had a pretty rough go of things since the fighting started. So it might explain why he was icy about the Kingslayer being freely released.
That's excellent background. Thank you, Mackelly, for doing that work. None of those were Jamie. If it was the Mountain who'd been released,
True. I think everyone might be putting all of the Lannister aggressions with Jamie's face on it since they had him here.
Taking the Lysa Arryn.
Yes. Any Lannister will do.
Uncle Brynden Blackfish Tully makes a public display of embracing Cat and showing her that he has no ill will towards her.
What were you going to say? Did you?
No.
I was just going to say, take that forgiveness that he displays Cat there publicly and think about the reaction that he has for Cat freeing Jamie. He likely chalks it up to, his love for his niece. He's supporting her regardless of what he thinks of the action. But then contrasted with his just blistering of Edmure when they get into private,
Yes, I suspected that's where you were heading. Yes, I definitely think as an uncle he's got favourites here, and Edmure is not it.
Both moves weaken their position, and you could argue that not freeing Jamie was a lot easier to go unsaid than not fighting an enemy force rolling through your front yard.
Imagine if you had to list all the things you weren't supposed to do while we were gone.
Now, don't free him while we're gone.
Because this answers the question of what the Freys were so upset about. We saw it. I mean, Kat saw it. Mentioned it in this chapter that she'd seen it earlier, but we'd seen it earlier yet in Arya 10 of Clash of Kings. She saw the Freys getting angry and storming out of Harrenhal. Couldn't remember the name of Harrenhal there, Mackelly.
It's been a long day for you.
It's been a long day.
You know, and that brings me to, I don't know. What I'm about to say might be too convoluted for pedantry, but it just seems to me like, did Robb find out before the folks in Riverrun found out? Because,
did Robb find out he was married before?
Did Robb find out about? Yeah, sorry, I should explain. I should be more specific. Did Robb find out about the supposed death of Brandon Rickon before Riverrun found out? Because all the way back in Arya 10, the Freys knew that Robb had married Jeyne.
Right.
And that happened after news reached Robb of Brandon Rickon's death.
Right.
So it happened long enough in the past that news made it from wherever all the way to Riverrun. I guess from the Crag, that news of their marriage would have started in the Crag, all the way to Riverrun. And then
on to Harrenhal too.
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah, obviously it didn't make it. If it made it to Riverrun, Kat didn't know. I meant to say Harrenhal there.
Right. Yeah.
But in Cat 7 of A Clash of Kings, Kat's party in Riverrun, remember there was that party going on? The chapter where it leads to Kat and Brienne down in the dungeons talking to Jamie, which leads to his release.
Right.
There was a party in Riverrun due to Robb's conquest of the Crag and Edmure's imminent return. And then there was a line that said, "There's another bird this morning." There was another bird this morning, which meant that was the bird that informed her of Brandon Rickon's death.
Oh,
so she just found out then, after news had already reached Riverrun, that Robb had won the Crag. So we don't know how long after Robb won the Crag that they got married, but news had already reached Riverrun about that before news had reached Riverrun about Brandon Rickon. So there's a lot of instances, and then you think, so Riverrun knew, or Harrenhal knew about this marriage the day that Arya escaped. And Kat freed Jamie the day she found out. But It seems like Arya traveled a lot longer, a lot slower.
Interesting. He has that note at the beginning of the book about timelines, but I think that you found a unsolvable mystery there, because I don't think it really fits. Unless a Frey was sent to sort of like hover next to Robb for the whole time he was with Robb, with some turbocharged pigeon. He was, weirdly, he sent it to Harrenhal, not to the twins.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like,
if he gets married to anyone, you tell Roose Bolton.
It would have had to have gone out after Robb found out about Brandon Rickon, because he married her the next day.
Yeah.
It feels like this happened before news got to Riverrun, is all I'm saying. And that means he got word first, which in some ways makes sense because he's the king, but also he's in the field. If you not know where news from the north would need to go to get to Robb first. Right. You would think it would all go through Riverrun.
Riverrun. I thought we'd had an example of that, of some word reaching Riverrun that was then being sent on to Robb, but I can't remember exactly what it was, but I have a recollection of that happening.
So anyway, that's my rant for the day.
Yeah, but I mean, the Freys have taken this as badly as you possibly could imagine them taking it, which wasn't that hard to imagine. The Freys are prickly and proud, and they don't want to be dissed. And if you say, I'll marry your daughter and then marry someone else, that's a pretty big diss.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And, there's leaving mad and feeling betrayed. And then there's leaving mad, feeling betrayed, and trampling on the king's banner on your way out of Riverrun. That's near treason right there.
Exactly.
So, and so Robb mentions that he marries Jeyne the day after they, she comforted him. Again, I'm using air quotes that nobody but Simon could see. And his thought was it was the only honorable thing to do. And that, of course, screams of Ned's influence on him,
Yeah.
Always do the honorable thing.
Robb did have other sort of influences in his life, one of whom was Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy would not have married her.
No, he would not.
He's definitely following his father's footsteps, not Theon's.
But you're right, absolutely. But I said it was Ned's influence. Always do the honorable thing, and there's obviously one mark on
shining counterexample.
Yes, and of course that is fathering Jon, which also goes to this could also have been Cat's influence. Because Robb grew up in Winterfell, he's all too familiar with how his mom treated Jon's presence there. So possibly, in Robb's mind, fathering a bastard was a cardinal sin based on his mom's reaction to it.
Okay, couple of points there. One was, the situation is different because Ned was married. Robb was not married.
True. Yes.
And the second one is, she isn't guaranteed to be pregnant. I mean, you might be sort of an ignorant northern hick, Robb, but it's not like every time you have sex they get pregnant. It
depends on how well Maester Lewin covered the sex education discussion.
You have in the notes here, sort of it's a terrible idea. I mean, to lose the Freys in this way is just such a terrible, terrible idea. But he's 16 and in love. But the one thing is, do you feel that? I feel like he was in love the night before he got married. Because he's 16 and love takes a very specific form.
Sure, right.
I'm not sure if he then married her because it was the honourable thing to do. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds like honour.
Right.
The way he's behaving with her and her family doesn't seem like it's lovey-dovey.
Yeah. I almost said you make a good point. They were making some jokes on the Discord server that they should start a bingo game based on our frequent sayings. One of mine was solid point. Interesting, of course, was on there.
Interesting, top dog, yeah. Put that in the center of the bingo card. Yeah.
So I was trying my best not to say good point or solid point, but it's just... Anyway, yes. I concur with your statements.
Yeah. And when we get to TV, I'll mention that that's very different because in the TV show, it's a real love story, no question about it.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is maybe he was keeping it cool and keeping the PDA low in front of his mom, who's probably, certainly shocked and stunned and maybe disapproves.
But, I mean, he said they specifically they're keeping Greywind out of the room because he doesn't like Sir Rolph.
Yeah.
Sir Rolph. But Jeyne doesn't like him either.
Yeah, right? Jeyne is scared of him.
Jeyne's scared of him too.
Yeah.
It's not a good match. I mean, you've got to be compatible with your pets. I mean, it's important.
Yep. Some people might put that as near the top of priorities for finding a partner.
Exactly. So, Darwin Westerling is Jeyne's father, Lord of the Crag, and he's now in an awful position because he was taken captive at the Battle of the Whispering Woods.
Yep.
So he's a captive, and meanwhile, his daughter has married the enemy king. So it's quite the elevation, but for the wrong side. You know?
Yes. It's one thing if she married Joffrey. That would
Right,
be
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
win-win for...
Yeah. Although it would raise his stock in the whole hostage bingo game, you know.
Yes, it would. And of course, he doesn't know Joffrey, or else he might be awfully happy that she married Robb. Mm. But for political purposes, it would be a much better match here.
Yeah. So he's got to change sides, basically, because his family have, without consulting him, switched sides, and they've all come here. So, but
yeah, he'll have to abandon the crag as well. He can't be schlepping back to the Westerlands.
Right. Or try and hold it as a sort of little outpost of the north in amongst the very irate Westerners.
Yeah, not likely to be successful there.
They'll love Winterfell. It'll be great up
there. Yeah, we saw how well Jorah Mormont's wife enjoyed moving to the north. What could possibly go wrong? So, but do we trust them to, like, they were very confident, very boastful in their backing of Robb. But do we trust them to back Robb? I mean, there have been the Westerlings have been Lannister bannermen for hundreds of years. So, yes, kids do crazy things for love or lust or whatever this might have been here, but we don't know them. We don't know this family. So is it possible?
I want a Westerling POV. I'd love to hear the family discussions. They would
absolutely.
So fraught, those family discussions. Because it's like, maybe we just cut ties with her. You know? Say, you're on your own and we go back to the crag, you know?
Right. Yeah, we could really use a ghost in Riverrun to spy on. To be a fly on the wall to hear what their discussions are.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, is it possible that Jeyne could have been sent with the task of seducing and winning Robb's love to get the family closer to sabotage Robb?
Oh, interesting. Well, possibly, but presumably not orchestrated by her father, because...
No, right, yes. It would have to have been someone else in the castle.
And so then you've got the whole Hoster Edmure thing going. We don't know what Hoster wants, so Edmure does stupid things, you know?
Right, yes.
You did what? You sent my daughter to give up her honor to an invading king, leaving me with the crag lost now and forever?
Yeah, you know, it could be a winning proposition. You know, Robb loses. They could cut a deal with the Lannisters to betray Robb for a pardon.
Yeah.
He wins. The Westerlings are up-jumped royalty, basically.
Yeah, true.
Or the other hand of that, the other side of that coin, the other hand of that coin, Robb loses, and Tywin schedules meetings with Illian Payne for all Westerlings and Spicers involved.
Yeah. Yep. I fear the last one is the most likely there.
Yeah.
Right, especially right now, because Robb's prospects just have taken just such a nosedive. Not just losing the Freys, but that's a huge loss, the Freys.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're comparing those numbers, right? It's 50 soldiers versus 3,000 foot soldiers.
Yeah.
That's 60-fold change, right?
Yeah, and that's not even including the knights.
And then the knights, it's 12 knights versus 1,000 mounted knights. That's...
Maybe those knights are really good.
But
Maybe.
actually, well, one thing, actually, you can double count the Westerlings because they were fighting for the other side before they switched sides.
Ooh, solid point, yes.
Well, that assumes that the Freys withdraw rather than completely switcheroo, which they might, let's be honest.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, technically, Robb is still Walder's king, and Hoster / Edmure is still his liege lord. So, theoretically, they should still need to tread lightly here. But then at the same time, they could switch sides. They could be so offended that they could switch sides. We'll have to see. You'd have to imagine Walder's going to be a little more cautious and than his children are and see which side looks like the better option to join, as he does, the late Walder Frey is known to do.
Right.
So Robb says to Cat, if I'd listened to you and kept Theon a hostage, I'd still rule the North, and Bran and Rickon would still be alive in Winterfell. And when I read it, it reminded me of Olenna Tyrell saying to Sansa that the realm would be a lot better place if everyone started listening to their mothers.
Right.
But, so if you recall from I think it was Cat 1 of A Clash of Kings, which was very early on, obviously, in A Clash of Kings. It might have been like one of the very first chapters. She told Robb to send anyone else but Theon to the Iron Islands to treat with Balon Greyjoy about an alliance. And of course, things worked out terribly, because we know what Theon has gone and done. But Kat responds with, perhaps not. Yeah, I think she's trying to make him feel a little bit better. And she's got some truth to what she says. She says, last time...
Yeah, you're right. She is trying to make him feel better by not blaming him for ignoring her.
Right.
But then she's sort of saying, even if you'd gone with me, it might not have worked out. Please continue.
Yeah, exactly. She said last time Balon reached for a crown, it cost him 2 sons. He may have seen it as a bargain to lose only 1 this time. And there's certainly a point there, because when Theon arrived at Pike, Balon was already calling his fleet to muster. And it seems like he probably wasn't doing that for a regatta off the coast. There was more to it than just a boat day.
Maybe. So Robb and Cat debate if there's any alternative arrangements possible for Walder. So Cat said what he was going to get was he was going to be the father of a queen and therefore the grandfather of the next king. So
yeah,
pretty high status.
Yes, especially for the Freys. That's quite the jump up.
Yes. So they consider possible... there's some possibilities. I mean, we can speculate on all of them. If Bran was still alive, he would be a possibility, but it's a hard one to sell, because there's definitely a chance that, probability, in fact, that Bran would be impotent. So that's a dead end,
I had not thought about that. Yeah, you could keep offering Stark kids. I mean, you could offer basically all of your kids to marry all of the Freys, but as soon as Robb has a kid, they all lose their any claim to the crown that they might have. So,
but the way the Stark kids are being lost left and right, she may need to legitimize, either get back in the game and have a few more, or legitimize Jon.
Right. Who's at the wall, who has taken a vow to never marry or father children.
But I believe we know that the king can release you from that vow.
Yes.
The king in the north could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Stark children possibilities, but first of all, she doesn't have any of them around. She thinks she's lost Bran and Rickon anyway. She thinks Arya and Sansa are being held captive. So, another possibility... Maybe she looks to her brother Edmure. He's soon to be Lord Paramount of the Trident. Now, that's not a king, but it's also not nothing.
Yeah, and it is also their own liege lord. It is their own. So that's kind of, to be the wife of your, it's like a northern lord getting their child married to the Stark heir. Yeah.
The one thing, though, is it depends on which king you back, because if you back Robb, then yes, Edmure will be very soon probably the Lord Paramount of the Trident. But if you back Joffrey, then that is Peter Baelish in Harrenhal that you pledged your fealty to as Lord Paramount of the Trident. So the plot's a little bit thicker there than it seems.
And I'm going to imagine that true to form, Walder Frey has not yet decided which of those two things would be preferable.
Right. Yes, you could definitely see that.
So Grey Wind, we mentioned, doesn't care for Sir Rolph Spicer. He growls and snaps when he's near. Kat reads a lot into this. I mean, again, Kat's the one person... It's funny because she's not from the north, but she's the one person who's seen what the wolves are capable of in terms of protecting her children. And so
Right.
a wolf that is attacking someone is trying to tell them something, and so she wants him removed from presence. Robb thinks she's losing her marbles, but he agrees to do it.
Yeah. And Robb and Greywind seem okay. Theon had that dream. I can't remember which chapter, but which Theon it was. But he had that dream when he was at the feast when King Robert was in Winterfell that Greywind and Robb entered the hall at Great Hall Winterfell, each with 100 wounds, and at least at this point they seem to be physically okay. So, a quick check-in on Theon's dream. Of course, that could have been a metaphor for betrayal. Maybe that's a metaphor for the Westerlings or the Spicers betraying
Right.
Robb and Greywind, since they don't seem to care much for Greywind.
So Robb, one of the reasons that Robb doesn't share his mother's views on the wolves anymore, at least, is because Bran and Rickon are purportedly dead, and so he feels like the wolves are not doing their job, and so they're just glorified pets now to Robb.
Right.
They're not guardian angels. If we could get news to him that it's not true that they're dead, maybe he would change his mind. But unfortunately,
yeah, and also about Robb's connection with Greywind. Again, we don't have him as a POV, so we can't really know. But Bran, Rickon, Jon, Arya have all had wolf dreams, so you would think that Robb has also had wolf dreams. We don't think Sansa has. We've not heard of any, but she lost Lady. So maybe does he possibly have less of a spiritual connection with Greywind than the other kids do?
Interesting.
And we do know that the Bran and Rickon aren't dead, and we know that they did survive, but not necessarily because of the wolves. It's not like the wolves came to their aid. Basically, they outsmarted the Ironborn by hiding in the crypts. But the wolves did play a role in the decoy. They sent them off to lead Theon astray to the plan. Yeah. So they were involved, but they weren't the protectors that Robb thinks that they should have been.
I also think you put this in the notes, but it's a good point that I think Robb also wants to sort of like demonstrate that he sees himself as his own man. He doesn't need the protection of a wolf. He's the king, and doesn't need to be nursemaided by a scary dog.
Yes, exactly.
So we mentioned that Robb sings Edmure's praises loudly for all to hear. But again, the problem was they didn't tell Edmure the plan, and so he went beyond his remit and prevented the plan. And as a result, King's Landing, Joffrey Baratheon remains on the Iron Throne because of this. Because the plan would have sucked Tywin's forces into the Westerlands, bogging them down 1,000 leagues from King's Landing, and there would have been no escape. I mean, there would have been no way for him to go help.
Yep, and I say, it's a fine plan. It
is a great plan. It also,
minus one little detail.
Yeah, and it's not like you had to tell a bunch of people. You just had to tell Edmure.
Right. Just one little detail.
Yeah.
Nobody told Edmure.
Yeah.
He said to hold Riverrun. So that's Robb's argument. I said to hold Riverrun, which is a pretty weak argument if you ask me.
Right.
How do they expect Edmure to know that the Lannister force is coming through the front yard and think, oh, I better not attack. Robb said to hold Riverrun.
Right.
That wouldn't be just holding Riverrun.
Right.
Especially knowing the audience there, knowing that Edmure is young and inexperienced and looking to find glory.
Be specific with what you want, right.
Yeah, like you said earlier, you got to know who you got to be specific with and who you can trust to make good decisions. Yeah. Not that I'm not even saying that necessarily Edmure's decision was a bad decision. It made sense at the time to protect your lands. Now, you could make the argument he was protecting Robb, who was in the west. Maybe he thought, I've got to stop Tywin from getting to the west so that, keep Robb safe.
Yeah. Anyway. It's an invading army marching through your land. You try and prevent them from doing what they want. That seems like a natural enough thing.
You could argue, well, how was he supposed to get that kind of sensitive information to Edmure? So my advice would be send riders. If you feel like a raven sending that information to through Raven Mail is too valuable to allow it to be captured or lost, then send a group of people to let Edmure know this.
If Tywin was bogged down, it is possible the Tyrells would have had a large enough force to defeat Stannis, but without Tywin, I don't think they would have come. It needed the immediacy of his presence, and especially because with him present, you suddenly realise how big your army is and how you're going to smash Stannis to smithereens. Well, you're on the winning side. Without Tywin's army there, the Tyrells might not see it as a foregone conclusion, and they might also be like, wait, so you've sent me a raven from the Westerlands where you're currently bogged down, surrounded by northerners, unable to go anywhere, and you want me to go and rescue your grandchildren?
Yeah, yes,
I
exactly.
might resist if I were the Tyrells.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Loras was heartbroken, and I'm sure he would have been, pulling hard in the direction of let's go attack Stannis, but that's not a reason that a wise Lord Paramount would pick a side here,
Yeah.
And I think your theory, you had mentioned the theory that this was previous, that Tywin was feigning west in order to make Robb think he was coming, know that Edmure would give fight to hold him back, and just to keep Robb in the west. I think it holds a little bit of, we get a little bit of backup to that in this chapter when Robb says to Edmure that Edmure knew he didn't have enough men to attack Lannisport or Casterly Rock. And also, the Blackfish says all of our force was mounted and most of Tywin's was foot.
Right.
You would think that Tywin might have known those same odds and think, I can't go in there and attack them. And plus, they can't really do major harm because they don't have a big enough force to really occupy it.
Yeah, take the big cities, right.
So, it's, it is possible that your idea could hold some water.
Well, thanks.
I kind of wondered how Robb got this information, but he explains to Edmure that the repercussions of the Battle of the Ford is that Rowans and the Tarleys reached Tywin from Bitterbridge with news of Stannis being at King's Landing. And we'd heard a few times that those sigils, the Rowans and the Tarleys, had been spotted north of the Mander. And Bitterbridge is where Littlefinger met with the Tyrells to propose the alliance of Joffrey, the Lannister-Tyrell alliance, and the marriage of Joffrey and Margaery. So, possibly it seems that the Tyrells didn't want to commit unless Tywin was involved, and that's why they sent those envoys.
Right.
Which we kind of had hit on a little bit ago as a possibility.
Yeah, and Kat mentions that she wishes Robb had fallen in love with Margaery Tyrell, which that would have been a better match. Now you've got two huge forces that could really make a difference, but wasn't to be.
No. Yeah, you would certainly think that if he'd fallen in love with Margaery Tyrell and married her, the Tyrell force would have filled in the gaps left by the Freys pulling away.
Oh, yeah. So Robb's hope from all of this plan that Edmure destroyed was that Stannis would take King's Landing and then settle for peace with Robb. Well, that's only true if you think of Stannis as being a forgiving and thoughtful person, which Kat tells Robb, she met him and she knows what he's like, and he was not going to be like that. He called Robb a traitor. And so
she was there. He said it to her. He said it straight to her. So there's
so
unless he needed Robb's help taking King's Landing, there was no way he accepts Robb as King of the North and the Trident.
Yeah, I mean, Robb could always retreat back north and just claim to be King of the North. There's nothing Stannis could do in the short term.
Yes.
But what's the point? You're quibbling over semantics at that point.
Yeah.
So Robb realizes that his list of enemies is growing and growing more powerful too. If you think of the Lannisters and the Tyrells already, and then possibly add the Freys to that, it's I mean, just the people with last name Frey is a lot of people.
It is. But Cat points out, if you don't take back the North first, then take off your crown. You must protect your homeland.
Yeah.
And she's got a point. It certainly weakens his position that he's running around saying he's king of the North when there's someone else sitting on the high chair at Winterfell, or whatever it would be called. I guess it would be a throne now.
Yeah. And they're behind us on the story. They don't know that Winterfell has fallen. Last they heard was Sir Roderick Cassel taking Torrhen Square and heading back to take Winterfell. So they are not yet aware of the Bolton treachery, if that's the right way to describe it.
Yeah. So that is, I guess, the news just stopped because who's sending them updates at that point?
Good point.
Yeah.
But
Edmure, he points out that really there is no way back to the North because the Ironborn hold Moat Cailin, and you can't take that. It's never been taken from the South, and you might end up with the Ironborn in front of you and the Freys behind you.
Yes,
and
very true.
I found it a little bit ironic at this part of the conversation. Kat mentions that there's nothing left to do but get vengeance on Theon and put him in a crow's cage to rot slowly. When just a little bit ago, when Rickard Karstark talked about his vengeance for his boys, she was like, vengeance. But it's your kids, who cares about the vengeance? When it's my kids, that's what's most important.
Yeah. So the chapter ends with the whole thing where Kat says they need to offer the phrase someone, and she doesn't explain who she means by that. So it's that question of who could be replaced. The one person that I thought of, and apologies if this is a spoiler, I certainly haven't read ahead to make this a spoiler, but is Catelyn talking about herself? She talking about herself?
Oh. Yes, that
she is
that could
eligible.
fit. Sure.
She's eligible. She's both a Tully and a Stark.
Right.
Probably past childbearing age, but there are some very senior male Freys.
She was thinking very early on in a Game of Thrones that she wasn't past childbearing age.
She was thinking about having another. That's true. Yeah.
So, and because of the TV show and how they up-jumped the ages of a lot of these characters, might seem like she's no longer of childbearing age. I can't recall her age off the top of my head, but I don't think she's as old as as you might think that she is.
Yeah, so maybe that's what she's talking about then.
Could be.
All right, do you have some background for us?
I do. So Robb tells Kat that a previous Jeyne Westerling was queen to King Maegor. Huh. Yeah, well, he's referring to a Jeyne who lived around 27 to 47 or 8 AC, and she was the widow of Lord Alan Tarbeck, one of several Westerlords who backed Prince Aemon in his fight for the Iron Throne with his uncle Maegor. Alan died fighting against Maegor in the battle beneath the God's Eye. Maegor sent for the widow Jeyne, who recently gave birth to her late husband's child, to join him in King's Landing as his queen. We've already talked about how he was married to 3 queens at once. Well, by 47 AC, 2 of the 3 had died. His first wife, Cerise Hightower, and his second wife, Alice Haraway. Only Queen Tyanna of the Tower survived. Maegor decided it was time to restock the cupboards. Since producing an heir had proved to be an issue, he chose 3 women who had all... He chose 3 women who had all had kids from previous husbands. The trio was called the Black Brides for another connection that they shared. All 3 were widows of men who had died over Maegor's disputed reign. Jeyne was joined in the wedding ceremony by Eleanor Costane and Maegor's niece, Rhaena, Prince Aegon's sister wife. Always the pragmatist, Maegor wed all 3 in one ceremony.
That's, it saves on catering.
Yeah, certainly.
You know?
And you probably just buy one gift instead of having to buy
that's
3
true,
separate
that's
gifts,
true.
you know? It's just practical, really.
Yeah, I mean, you can get something his and hers and hers and hers.
Yes, I think you do. Well, Jeyne was the first of the new queens to become pregnant about half a year into their marriage. She was followed shortly thereafter by Eleanor. Unfortunately, much like Queen Alice Haraway before her, she gave birth to a stillborn child lacking arms and legs, but with male and female genitalia. Jeyne herself, unfortunately, wouldn't survive the birth. Eleanor also birthed an eyeless stillborn child with small wings. Sometime later, Queen Tyanna admitted to poisoning all 3 pregnancies. Alice Haraway being the third pregnancy that did not turn out well. Anyway, Eleanor and Rhaena were the only wives to survive Maegor's reign and his life in general.
Yeah. Well, comparison with the television show, so there's a major departure here. So the TV show decided to make more of the romance of Robb marrying someone, so they changed the character entirely. It's a woman from Essos called Talisa, and he falls in love with her. She acts as a sort of battlefield nurse, and he falls in love with her over several battles. And
I remember this.
It's a love story, but taking a step back and looking at the strategic, it's just as disastrous. You're not
right.
even getting the 50 knights you were getting from the Westerlings. You're getting nothing from this.
Because she wasn't even from a noble house.
Exactly. Yeah, I think she might have been fairly wealthy or something like that in her youth, maybe. Or very poor. Something. She was something. But that was all...
She had some backstory.
That's all in the future. So we'll see. But it is a complete departure because she was just a very different character, different person. That's the one who was played by... Talisa was played by Charlie Chaplin's descendant. His great-grandchild.
I did not know that.
Pedantry Corner, I didn't really find any pedantry in this one, apart from my just general sympathy for Edmure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my pedantry would just be if Robb did... It seems possible, almost likely, that Robb found out about Brandon Rickon's death before Cat did, and that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I can't prove it. It just seems like that's what happened.
Oh yeah, I think your timing pedantry holds up. I'm with you on that. News and notes. So we our 3rd year anniversary is coming up, right? And we're thinking about doing something for it. We're not 100% sure yet, but maybe a YouTube live chat. Give people a chance to throw some questions at us.
That's what we're thinking. So our 3-year anniversary will be October 7th. Now, I don't think that's the day because that's a Friday, and we usually have other obligations on Fridays. But just keep checking out our Discord server. We'll update you all there. Now, literally, this is the first time Simon and I have had a chance to really chat about such things in 3 weeks, and he's running on about 2 hours of sleep. So
I did agree to it. I mean, I'll listen back to the recording to hear myself agreeing to it.
So we're gonna try to pull something together. So keep an eye out for updates about it.
Yeah, sounds good. Why don't you? We got a Podchaser review. Why don't you take that one, Mackelly?
All right. Well, it's from Flying Man 67, as you mentioned, from podchaser.com. And it goes like this. Love, love, love this show. It's short enough to get all info needed and not long drawn out and boring. Very informative and greatly entertaining.
Mackelly, I think you need to cut a bit deeper on this one than because this one's gonna upset Flying Man 67.
Yes, I think so.
And the other contact we got was I don't have all the details here, but a lady from France contacted us while I was in France, so I made a point of writing back to Laura, I think she's called, and she was from our core demographic, people who do housework, and that's where she listened. And she seemed very nice, and she was very puzzled by your name. She thought that you and I were just you had basically the name Michael, but we were saying it in sort of the Italian way, the sort of Mackelly, like that.
Right. But yes.
When she finally saw it written down, she was flabbergasted. And
it took me a while to figure out what was going on there because I did not put all those pieces together. But she provided a clip to the Italian pronunciation of what looks like the spelling of Michelle.
Michelle, yeah.
And it's pronounced Mackelly.
Mackelly, exactly.
Very much like my name.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she was thinking, why does he never mention his Italian heritage?
His complete lack of Italian heritage.
So thank you both. Thank you both for reaching out.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
All right, let's finally conclude this. We're about like our 7th Zoom call to get through all this now. So Robb played Cat well there, but I actually think that he's made yet another strategic error here. I think he actually had to come down with the hammer on Cat. Because it was more important, it was less important that he get away with what he'd done than it was to bring the Karstarks back on board.
Sure. Yeah. And it also says, yeah, you can defy me and I'm I'm a pushover possibly.
Yeah. I'm a pushover because I keep committing these sins for which I have to atone, and so I let you push me around because of them.
Sure.
It's bad luck. It's a bad look for a leader.
I see it. Yeah.
But the Freys do seem like quite the critical loss for Robb. And if you recall, Roose sent a large force to, I believe, Duskendale for seemingly no reason. So this might be a good time to call them back to Riverrun.
Yeah.
Because I think they need some replenishment of their forces.
Indeed. But does Walder really have much recourse in the long run? I mean, he's a Tully bannerman. You know, he could say, I was tricked into letting you cross the river, but he should have let them across the river anyway. You know, these were...
Right.
It was Catelyn Tully at his door, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's surrounded by Stark loyalists.
Exactly.
You know, as far as houses
Starks,
go.
Yeah, to the north of him is Starks, to the south of him is Tully lands. You know, he would be, if he truly rebelled at this point, he would be very isolated.
Right.
But he can certainly withdraw his support. That's the easier thing to do.
You know, Robb did the unusual thing here in this feudal system, and he married for love at possibly the worst time to marry for love and not for strategic alliance.
Yes. As the firstborn son, you've got to accept the pros and the cons. The pros, you're going to be the king. The cons, you are not going to get to choose your wife. And you're certainly not going to do it when you go away on a little vacation to the Westerlands for the first time and you come back with a wife. No.
Yeah, they need to get to a scepter and have that
yes
that marriage annulled right away quick.
Yeah. That would help.
The chapter ends with Robb saying, we need to win back the Freys to have any chance of success. So if they do win back the Freys, then they're basically just back to square one.
Yeah.
You know that. But if they don't, then they've really put themselves in quite a hole here.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could use the Westerlings to sort of like do a PR campaign in the West and sort of like maybe get some more minor houses to switch sides. I'm not seeing it.
No.
With the way things just shook down at King's Landing, are you going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to give the old middle finger to Tywin"?
Right. Yeah, as Kat says, the Lannisters don't suffer this kind of betrayal since Tywin's been old enough to go to war.
Right.
So Rolph and Sybell are both Spicers, and I didn't want to get into it in this chapter because we'll learn more about the Spicers. They have a rather interesting, to use the word that we don't use very often on this show, historical background of their house. And when we get to that, we'll see that Tywin does not suffer slights very well.
I see.
Let's just say the Spicer's seat is Castamere.
Yes. Which doesn't sound like their last name. It's not called Spicermere.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I like your idea that, you know, maybe they took their pretty daughter and actually tried to coerce this, try to make this happen.
It's a gamble. It's
a huge
quite
gamble,
the gamble.
and I don't know. Maybe when you've just been invaded and defeated, that the army that defeated you looks very strong and powerful, and so maybe you hitched yourself to that wagon seems like a good idea, but.
Or maybe they thought that Robb was going to put them all to the sword. And thought this was a last-ditch effort to try and save everyone's life.
She could have just nursed him back to health. That might have been enough to spare them.
Yeah, that could have been.
And let's just light it up on Edmure. He's doing his best. He's young. He's trying.
Yeah, I mean, did they expect him to consult Melisandre and her flames? I mean, how is he supposed to read their minds when the Lannister army traipses right across his front yard?
Yeah, and we still don't know what Robb's next move is. I mean, he could try to go north. We know that's going to be tricky for him, and then reclaim Winterfell. And that would allow him to protect the north from the Lannisters, but is he King of the Trident at that point?
It's the King of the Trident that causes all the issues. He very well could, if he can get around Moat Cailin, go back to the north and being King of the North. He very well could hold that. Possibly could hold that with Moat Cailin. And if Lord Wyman Manderley is building the fleet of ships like he told Bran he wanted to do, there's a possibility he could be King in the North. It's the King of the Trident that causes all these issues, because he's now caused the people of the Riverlands to revolt against their king. And what does he do? Go back to the north and be like, sorry about that. You guys are going to have to fend for yourselves.
Yeah. Although, not to be pedantic, but the Riverlands were being attacked by the West before
yes, they were.
He gave himself this name. And so, I mean, even if he'd always said, I'm just the King of the North, just here helping my grandfather protect his lands, the day he goes back north, Tywin's coming for the Tullys. And the Riverrun will no longer be the seat of House Tully. It'll be House of Seat someone else.
Right.
Like the Freys, for instance.
Yeah, and he's already... Tywin has already made Littlefinger Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. So
there's 3 ways that you could help us out. First is leave us a positive review. That really helps to spread the word. Second, you can buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. Lastly, you could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal, where you could become a Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm sustainer, and it'll keep us going for a bit longer.
Absolutely. We very much appreciate those who have and those who will become sustainers. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can go out and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.